Have you ever caught yourself in a silent replay of an interaction, a knot tightening in your stomach as you relive a moment where you felt unseen? Perhaps it was a friend talking over you, their words washing over yours as if they held a monopoly on importance. Or maybe it was a family member who consistently dismisses your feelings with a wave of their hand and a casual, "Oh, you're just being sensitive." It could even be a colleague who habitually takes credit for your ideas, leaving you feeling like a ghost in your own professional life. These moments, these subtle yet piercing acts of disrespect, often leave us questioning ourselves. Why does this keep happening? Why do I feel like I'm constantly on the periphery, my voice unheard, my needs unmet? We might find ourselves bending over backwards, becoming the ultimate people-pleaser, the one who always says yes, the reliable shoulder to cry on, all in the unspoken hope that one day finally we will be seen, valued, and treated with the basic dignity we crave. But what if the key to unlocking that respect doesn't lie in changing them, but in fundamentally shifting something within us? The renowned psychologist Carl Jung, a profound explorer of the human psyche, offered a powerful and perhaps unsettling truth. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Think about that for a moment. Why would self-acceptance be terrifying? Perhaps because it forces us to confront not only our strengths, but also our perceived flaws, our vulnerabilities, the very parts of ourselves we might have spent a lifetime trying to hide or ignore. And this, I believe, is intricately linked to the respect we receive from the world around us. When we lack a deep-seated respect for ourselves, we inadvertently send out signals, often subtle, unconscious ones, that invite others to treat us in kind. It's not about blaming the victim. It's about recognizing a dynamic, a pattern that often originates within. Imagine a plant that isn't rooted firmly in the soil. It sways with every breeze, easily uprooted, dependent on external support to stay upright. Similarly, when our sense of self-worth is shaky, when we haven't cultivated a strong inner foundation of self-respect, we become vulnerable to the whims and opinions of others. We seek external validation to fill the void within, inadvertently giving others the power to define our value. Consider Sarah, a bright and talented graphic designer. In team meetings, her ideas were often overlooked, attributed to more assertive colleagues, or simply ignored until someone else voiced a similar thought. Sarah, wanting to be liked and avoid conflict, would often stay silent, a tight smile masking her frustration. She'd work late, go above and beyond, hoping her dedication would finally earn her the recognition she deserved. Yet, the pattern continued. The more she tried to prove her worth through tireless effort and quiet compliance, the less her contributions seemed to matter. What Sarah didn't realize was that her silence, her reluctance to assert her ideas, was inadvertently communicating a lack of confidence in her own value. It wasn't a conscious message, but it was a palpable energy that others picked up on. Her actions, driven by a desire for acceptance, were ironically reinforcing the very disrespect she longed to escape. The truth, as uncomfortable as it may be, is that the world often mirrors back to us the relationship we have with ourselves. If we consistently treat ourselves as an afterthought, if we silence our own needs and opinions, if we allow others to constantly cross our boundaries, we are essentially teaching the world how to treat us. Think about the last time someone truly disrespected you. What was your immediate reaction? Did you speak up clearly and firmly, stating your boundaries? Or did you swallow your feelings, perhaps rationalizing their behavior or blaming yourself in some way? Our responses in these moments reveal a lot about the underlying level of self-respect we possess. Carl Jung believed that our external reality is often a symbolic manifestation of our unconscious. The disrespect we experience, the dismissals, the painful silences, these can be reflections of unresolved inner conflicts, of parts of ourselves we have rejected or suppressed. Perhaps growing up you learned that expressing anger was unacceptable, that being good meant always being agreeable. Maybe you experienced situations where your needs were consistently ignored, leading you to believe that your feelings didn't matter. These early experiences can create deep-seated beliefs about our worthiness, beliefs that continue to operate in the background, shaping our interactions and attracting similar experiences in adulthood. Imagine Michael, who grew up in a household where his opinions were constantly belittled. As an adult, he found himself in friendships and romantic relationships where his thoughts and feelings were consistently dismissed. He would often second-guess himself, hesitant to voice his true opinions for fear of ridicule. Unconsciously, he was recreating the dynamic he had experienced in his childhood, attracting people who mirrored that dismissive behavior because it felt familiar, even if it was painful. The key here isn't to wallow in past experiences, but to recognize how these early imprints might be influencing our present-day interactions. Until we bring these unconscious patterns into the light of awareness, they will continue to shape our reality, often in ways that leave us feeling powerless and disrespected. So how do we begin to break this cycle? It starts with a fundamental shift in focus, turning our attention inward and cultivating the very respect we seek from others. This journey begins with a courageous act, stopping the relentless pursuit of external validation. For so many of us, our lives have been a performance, a constant striving to be the ideal child, partner, friend, employee. We mold ourselves to fit the expectations of others, hoping that by pleasing them, we will finally earn their respect and love. But this is a precarious foundation upon which to build our self-worth. When our sense of value is contingent on the approval of others, we become incredibly vulnerable. A compliment lifts us to the heavens, while a criticism can send us spiraling into self-doubt. Our self-esteem becomes a hostage to the ever-shifting opinions of the world around us. Think of Emily, who constantly sought praise from her demanding boss. She would work tirelessly, sacrificing her personal time and well-being, all for a fleeting word of approval. But this approval was never consistent, and Emily found herself constantly anxious and insecure, her sense of worth entirely dependent on her boss's often critical gaze. She had fallen into the trap of external validation, believing that her value was determined by someone else's judgment. The truth is, those who live to please often end up being seen as someone who can be easily manipulated, their boundaries blurred, their needs secondary. Genuine respect isn't earned through constant self-sacrifice. It emanates from a deep-seated sense of self-worth, an inner knowing that you are inherently valuable, regardless of external accolades. Carl Jung spoke of the persona, the social mask we wear to navigate the world and gain acceptance. While the persona is a necessary aspect of social interaction, the danger lies in identifying too strongly with it, in losing touch with our authentic selves in the process of trying to please everyone else. When we become overly invested in our external image, we risk becoming a polite ghost, a presence that others might find agreeable but don't truly respect because they sense a lack of genuine self beneath the surface. The desire for acceptance is natural, a fundamental human need. However, when this desire becomes the driving force of our identity, when we measure our worth by the reactions of others, we lose our center. We become like a weather vane, constantly shifting direction in response to external winds, never truly grounded in our own internal compass. So how do we reclaim our inner compass? It begins with the courage to say no. We have been conditioned to believe that being a good person means always being accommodating, never contradicting, always putting others' needs before our own. We've been taught that setting boundaries is selfish, that love equals self-sacrifice. As a result, we often swallow our discomfort, stay silent when our boundaries are crossed, and forgive too quickly, even when no apology is offered. We mistake this self-negation for maturity or compassion, but in reality, we are slowly eroding our sense of self-worth. The world, unfortunately, doesn't respect those who don't respect themselves. Respect isn't something that can be begged for or negotiated. It is, in essence, imposed, not through aggression, but through a firm, clear, and non-negotiable assertion of our boundaries. Saying no is the first concrete act of self-respect. It is a powerful declaration to ourselves and to the world that our needs, our time, our energy, and our well-being matter. It establishes the lines that will not be crossed. Consider David, who was always the go-to person for favors at work. He would readily take on extra tasks, even when he was already overwhelmed, fearing that saying no would make him seem unhelpful or lazy. As a result, he was constantly stressed and resentful, while his colleagues often took his willingness for granted. The moment David started to politely but firmly decline additional requests when he was already at capacity, something shifted. Initially, some colleagues were surprised, even a little put out, but over time they began to respect his time and his boundaries. His no wasn't an act of defiance, it was an act of self-respect that ultimately earned him more respect from others. The guilt will inevitably surface when you start setting boundaries, especially with those who have grown accustomed to your compliance. It will whisper doubts in your ear, trying to pull you back into old patterns of people-pleasing. But it's crucial to recognize this guilt as a byproduct of old conditioning, not as a sign that you're doing something wrong. Carl Jung reminded us that the journey of individuation, becoming our true selves, requires confrontation. And one of the first confrontations is with the version of ourselves that learned to survive by saying yes to everything, the version that believes pleasing others is the only path to acceptance. But this acceptance comes at a steep price: our personal value, our dignity, our very identity. Do you want to be respected? Start by saying no where you used to say sure. Start refusing tasks that drain you. Start distancing yourself from relationships that feel consistently depleting. Start declining invitations you accept out of obligation. Notice the initial reactions. Those who benefited most from your lack of boundaries might be the most resistant to your newfound self-assertion. But this discomfort is a necessary part of the process. Every time you say no to an external demand that compromises your well-being, you are saying a powerful yes to yourself. This yes is the seed of your own authority, the reclaiming of your voice, the beginning of a life lived on your own terms, no longer dictated by the need for external approval. But there's often a deeper, more hidden reason why we struggle to set boundaries and cultivate self-respect. It lies in the unacknowledged corners of our psyche, in what Jung called the shadow. Our shadow encompasses all the aspects of ourselves that we have repressed, denied, or tried to bury: emotions, impulses, traits, desires, because we learned, consciously or unconsciously, that they were unacceptable. The child reprimanded for expressing anger might learn to suppress that healthy emotion. The one ignored when seeking attention might learn to become invisible. The one punished for asserting their needs might learn that their desires don't matter. As we grow, we construct a socially acceptable persona, a carefully curated image we present to the world, while relegating these unacceptable parts of ourselves to the unconscious shadow. But what is buried doesn't disappear. It often gains strength in the darkness, silently influencing our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Our shadow can sabotage our attempts to assert ourselves. It is the inner voice that whispers, "better not," when we feel the urge to speak up, the feeling of paralysis that washes over us when we want to say enough. Think about how many times you've wanted to express your anger at an injustice, but stayed silent to keep the peace. How many times have you swallowed your pride to avoid conflict, only to feel a simmering resentment later? How many times have you allowed someone to cross your boundaries and then felt used, dirty, or small? We tolerate the intolerable because we are often unaware of the parts of ourselves we have disowned, the strength, the healthy aggression, the righteous indignation that resides within our shadow. We fear accessing these parts, perhaps because we still subconsciously believe that expressing them will lead to rejection or punishment, echoing those early experiences. We might still cling to the belief that to be loved, we must be passive, that to maintain relationships we must erase our own needs. But this is a lie, an outdated program running in the background of our minds. Until we confront this shadow, we will continue to replay the same patterns in different scenarios. New friends who still disrespect our boundaries, new jobs where we still feel exploited, new relationships where we still feel invisible. Consider Mark, who prided himself on being a nice guy, always avoiding confrontation and prioritizing the needs of others. However, he consistently found himself in situations where people took advantage of his kindness. He couldn't understand why his efforts to be agreeable always seemed to backfire. What Mark didn't realize was that his suppressed assertiveness, a healthy part of his shadow, was manifesting as passivity, making him an easy target for those who were less scrupulous. His fear of being seen as mean prevented him from setting necessary boundaries, ultimately leading to him being treated poorly. Jung wisely said, "What you do not accept in yourself controls you." Our repressed anger can turn into passive aggression or a simmering resentment. Our buried firmness can manifest as crippling fear. Our ignored voice can lead to anxiety and a feeling of powerlessness. We become prisoners of our own denial, hoping that someone else will treat us with the respect we don't allow ourselves. The path to genuine self-respect involves the courageous act of integrating our shadow, of reclaiming the parts of ourselves we have learned to repress. This isn't about becoming cruel or indifferent. It's about becoming whole, about accessing the full spectrum of our being, including our strength, our assertiveness, and our ability to protect ourselves. Before we can demand respect from others, we must reclaim our own inner power. And often, that power lies in the very places we least want to look, within the depths of our shadow. If this resonates with you, if you feel a stirring of recognition within, it's a sign that it's time to take a step towards reclaiming your self-respect. And this isn't just a passive realization. It requires conscious, consistent action. Here are a few practical tools you can start applying today. 1. Use discomfort as your compass. Pay attention to those moments when you feel a pang of unease in an interaction. Don't immediately dismiss it or rationalize the other person's behavior. Ask yourself, if I truly respected myself, what would I do right now? Perhaps the answer is to politely end the conversation, to decline a request, or to take some space. Follow that inner guidance. Discomfort is often your intuition signaling that you are betraying your own needs. 2. Stop over-justifying. You don't need to write an essay explaining every no. A simple and direct, "I can't. That doesn't work for me," or "I'm not comfortable with that," is sufficient. Over-justifying communicates insecurity and invites further questioning or pressure. Respectful communication is clear and concise. 3. Prioritize yourself in your schedule. Look at your week. Where have you allocated time just for you? If the answer is nowhere, that's a clear indicator of internal disrespect. Schedule activities that nourish your mind, body, and spirit, not as a luxury, but as a non-negotiable appointment. Even dedicating just an hour a day to yourself can profoundly shift your internal landscape. 4. Replace reactivity with a pause. When someone disrespects you, resist the urge to immediately lash out or retreat into silence. Instead, take a breath, create a brief pause, and then respond calmly and clearly. State your boundaries. "I don't appreciate being spoken to that way," or "That's not okay with me." You don't need to apologize for feeling disrespected. Simply communicate your boundaries with clarity and firmness. 5. Curate your environment. Take a close look at the people you surround yourself with. Do they uplift and value you, or do they consistently drain you and only seek you out when they need something? The respect you receive is also a reflection of the environments you choose to inhabit. Learn to create healthy distance from those who consistently disrespect you. Those who genuinely value you will notice and appreciate your presence. Those who don't notice were likely never truly seeing you anyway. These practices might feel challenging at first because they require breaking deeply ingrained patterns. Be patient with yourself, be firm in your commitment, and celebrate the small victories. The more you practice self-respect in the small moments, the more resilient you become against disrespect in the larger ones. There is one final crucial piece of this puzzle: the fear of being alone. Emotional dependency can be the last chain that binds us to disrespectful situations. We might tolerate mistreatment out of a fear of being abandoned or unloved. But true respect, both from ourselves and from others, blossoms when we are no longer dependent on external validation for our sense of worth. There comes a time when we must stop blaming others and take radical responsibility for our own lives. Stop waiting for people to change, to finally see your worth, to treat you with the respect you haven't yet fully given yourself. The world isn't blind. It's often just reflecting the way you present yourself. You yearn to be heard, yet you silence your own voice. You long to be valued, yet you accept meager scraps of attention. You desire to be prioritized, yet you consistently put yourself last. And then you wonder why you feel invisible. The truth, though it may sting, is that often we hide ourselves. As Carl Jung so powerfully stated, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The disrespect you receive, the hurtful relationships, the repeating cycles, these aren't random misfortunes. They are often reflections of your own relationship with yourself. The external world will begin to shift when your internal landscape reorganizes. You don't need to become cold or impenetrable to be respected. You need to stop begging for love in the form of obedience. You need to stop conforming to environments that suffocate your authenticity. And above all, you need to make peace with the idea of being alone if necessary. Because only those who are whole within themselves can truly choose who they want to be with, rather than clinging to relationships out of fear or dependence. From this moment forward, every time someone crosses your boundaries, you have a choice. You can either stay silent and reinforce the pattern, or you can take a stand, gently but firmly, and rewrite your story. You don't need aggression. You need authenticity. When you genuinely respect yourself, your energy shifts, your posture changes, your gaze becomes steady, and the world takes notice. Respect begins within. And when that foundation is strong, the respect you deserve becomes not something you have to ask for, but something that is inevitably given.